Hello everyone, Phoenix Knight here. Welcome to the channel, and welcome to the end of December recap. When I was getting ready to make this recap, I was half expecting that by the time we got together for this, I was going to be just a totally exhausted puddle of goo when this month was over. Somehow, I'm not a puddle of goo, but I am quite, well, I would say I'm tired. Definitely a little bit sore since I got my afternoon workout in, but I'm slightly rambly on that front. Anyway, we've had the Advent of the Phoenix going on all month, and it has been quite the month with quite a few board games played on the channel. So, in this video, we're going to recap them all. Hopefully by the time you're sitting down to watch this, you've got your whatever snacks you're watching, or whatever snacks you're eating. Maybe you're sitting down with dinner or something, but it's definitely going to be a long recap. So, hopefully you're ready for it, but let's jump right in. We'll start off with the first game that we played for the month, as we played Mag 23, Guadalcanal. Mag 23 Guadalcanal from Historic Wings dumps you into the Guadalcanal battle during World War II in the Pacific. You're playing as a Marine Corps group of pilots trying to fly against the Japanese during various land, sea, and air missions. I featured this game on the channel a couple times before, but those were part of a different playthrough. What I decided to do was I decided to start a playthrough just for on the channel. That way I don't have the disjointed story, because that was kind of bothering me a little bit. So we actually played 4 missions. We actually played 4 days on the channel. The first day we cruised to victory pretty easily with 2 land missions. The second day we had 2 air missions, and we won that day as well, but that one we had to fight for a little bit more. The last 2 days ended up being washouts. Well, by washout I mean we didn't fly those 2 days. The third day I was getting ready for the cruiser task force coming in, and I was under bad conditions on the runway, so I decided to sit tight and let the Japanese come, which was a calculated gamble in case the runway decided to take a few more hits, but thankfully it didn't take any hits, so when the cruiser task force was coming in, we would have been ready to fly, except the dice decided to throw rain at us for that last day, and we decided not to fly. We also got away with one because we didn't end up catching any hits, we didn't catch any significant hits, and we didn't lose any aircraft on that last day, so we ended up on a push for that day. So we're at 2-1-1 in the first week. We'll be continuing that off and on next year. Next up, Christmas in Arkham took center stage as we started in with the first leg, Eldritch Horror. Eldritch Horror from Fantasy Flight Games is basically a world scope game where you're traveling around the world trying to deal with the mysteries of the Ancient Ones. You have to solve some number of mysteries to win. Usually it's 3, but that's not always the case in the game. We ended up losing this, and our opponent for Christmas in Arkham this year was Haster. We ended up losing Eldritch Horror handily, which meant we were starting Arkham Horror 2nd Edition down 1 health and 1 sanity. I do really enjoy this game, so I'm not really going to sing its praises too much. You guys have heard me talk about it before. Next up, we had our first new game to the channel, and by far our biggest game that we've ever played on the channel, as we played Mr. President. Mr. President from GMT Games has you jumping into the role of the President of the United States, playing through various scenarios. There's a whole sandbox scenario, there's a 2001 to 2004, 4 to 8, 8 to 12, 12 to 16, 16 to 20, and just one for 2020. We went through the 2020 scenario, and even that was a mammoth scenario. I think the video ran just under 4 hours, and if I would have remembered to handle the camera the way I normally do, it would have probably been even a little bit longer than that. But we did manage to get reelected in the scenario. I might end up featuring this game around election season, but it will definitely need a weekend devoted to it. But I guess my advice if you're coming new to it is take it slow. It looks very intimidating, but it's actually fairly straightforward. As long as you take it slow and follow through the turn sequence, you should be able to get through it just fine. Next up, we had another replay on the channel as we played Call to Adventure Epic Origins. Call to Adventure Epic Origins by Brotherwise Games is supposed to be a campaign game set in the Call to Adventure universe, where you're going through the normal gameplay of Call to Adventure, but you're theoretically going through a campaign. And I say theoretically because it doesn't really feel like a campaign to me, where you don't really feel the consequences of your actions in your later scenarios. And there's also the problem of the treadmill campaign experience, where you play through a scenario, and if you lose, you go back to it with no penalty. So for now, the campaign will continue, but once again, I'm going to introduce the house rule that I normally have with treadmill campaign games, where once we lose 3 times over the course of a campaign, or one scenario twice, the campaign will be over. So that's how I'm going to handle that. Next up, we had another replay game on the channel, as we played Marvel Champions. Marvel Champions from Fantasy Flight Games has you building decks around heroes in the Marvel Comics universe, trying to take on villains in the same. We took Storm and Phoenix out again against Ultron, who's the last villain in the core box, and we managed to defeat Ultron rather, well, I wouldn't say easily, but I didn't really feel like we were in danger the entire game. I think it helped that we had enough AoE to keep the drones under control, really. There's still a lot with Marvel Champions to dig into, though. So I don't think we've seen the last of Marvel Champions on the channel. Next up, we're going to start a streak of new games to the channel. First up with just probably our 3rd or 4th sports game on the channel, as we played Payoff Pitch Baseball. Payoff Pitch Baseball by Sideline Strategy Games, just like it sounds, is a baseball simulator, using cards and dice to go through the game. For this one, we took out a fantasy series of the Arizona Diamondbacks against the Boston Red Sox at Fenway Park. This one was inspired by a post that I saw on Facebook comparing Randy Johnson and Pedro Martinez, 2 of my favorite pitchers from that era. And it got me digging to where I wanted to see, have Randy Johnson and Pedro Martinez ever faced off before head-to-head? And to my surprise, from what I could find, apparently they haven't faced off head-to-head against each other. So that's how this first game of Payoff Pitch Baseball came about. Boston won that game 4-3 in 10 innings with a walk-off homer by Carl Everett. I had enjoyed the game enough that I decided I was going to go ahead and do a 3-game series of that. Arizona sent Curt Schilling to the hill against Hideo Nomo for Game 2. Arizona won that one 6-5 in normal innings. It ended up being, I think that one was actually the worst shootout of the bunch. And then Game 3, Tim Wakefield took the hill for Boston, I believe against Albie Lopez for Arizona, but I don't remember who started that one. I do remember that the starter didn't win that game. 3-2 was the final in Game 3, so Arizona actually took 2 of 3 from Boston at Fenway Park. But that's it for Payoff Pitch Baseball. Next up, we had another new game to the channel as we debuted Skies Above the Reich from GMT Games. Skies Above the Reich by GMT Games dumps you into the skies over World War II Europe. You're playing as the Germans trying to knock down the American box bomber formation. I did enjoy this game, even if there were a lot of rough edges that need to come out of the game. There's a very strong narrative focus here as well, which I also really like. And the fact that it stretches out over several missions into a campaign is something else that I really enjoy about this game. I did have 3 pilots killed in this playthrough, though, so I'm not completely sure if I'm going to continue with that campaign or if I'm going to try to start a fresh one. I may end up just continuing that campaign, but I'll have to figure out some way to introduce new pilots to that. But that's it for Skies Above the Reich. Next up, we had another new game to the channel as we debuted Silent Victory. Silent Victory by GMT Games is in the Hunters series of games, where this time you're playing a U.S. sub going after the Japanese in the Pacific Ocean. Like the Hunters series, like the rest of the Hunters series, there's a very strong narrative focus here, and I really enjoyed that. But we had a very short career for Lieutenant Commander Kirkish, as he hit a mine south of Japan and ended up sinking his sub, killing everybody aboard. Sometimes that's what happens when you go that near the mainland, though. But that's it for Silent Victory. I've talked about the rest of the Hunters series, at least the few times I featured the Hunters on the channel, and I really enjoyed those. I really enjoy this series of games. Next up, we had another replay game on the channel as we played Cthulhu: Death May Die. Cthulhu: Death May Die from CMON Games stands for Cool Mini or Not, dumps you into the Cthulhu mythos, which is a setting we're going to be visiting a fair amount this month, as we go through a dice game where we're trying to manage our sanity of our investigators along with our health. For this one, we decided to play Blasphemous Alchemy again against Hastur, and this ended up being a disaster. We just couldn't crack it. The scenario ended up ending before Hastur woke up. I forget who bit it in that one, but I believe somebody ended up dead before Hastur woke up. I still really enjoy this game, though, so it's probably going to be getting to the channel again. Next up, we had another roll and write to the channel as we played Roll for Great Old Ones from Hodari Spiel. Roll for Great Old Ones from Hodari Spiel is a roll and write game set in the Cthulhu mythos. It was a Kickstarter from Hodari Spiel that I got earlier this year. I did an unboxing on it on the channel, of course. We played through the first scenario. I believe it was the Blessings of Relay or something like that. I forgot what the exact name of the scenario was. But it ended in disaster, and I think part of the reason why is I got a comment earlier this afternoon during my workout where apparently I missed a pretty big rule that made it almost impossible for me to win, where I was only using each number once, and I should have used it a second time. So I'm not sure how much of a difference it would have made in that playthrough, but I may end up getting that to the channel again just to see if having two actions with each of your dice makes a difference. But that's it for Roll for Great Old Ones. Next up, Christmas in Arkham continued with the second leg of the campaign, Arkham Horror 2nd Edition. Arkham Horror 2nd Edition by Fantasy Flight is the predecessor to Eldritch Horror, where you're going around the city of Arkham trying to basically keep the Ancient One from waking up by sealing gates, ideally. Of course, our opponent was Hastur, and the only way we were winning a gate seal game against Hastur was in my dreams, because the way he modifies the game while he's slumbering is the cost to seal gates is increased to 8 instead of 5, and asking us to get 48 clue tokens or some combination of 48 clue tokens and 6 elder signs to be able to try to seal the 6 gates was turned out to be too much of an ask for us. We ended up tapping out on that one. This was also our first time playing with the King in Yellow Act deck. The Act deck was thematic with Hastur, probably wouldn't be thematic with any of the other Ancient Ones, but it had a You Just Lose condition in it. I've talked about this before, but You Just Lose conditions are normally a hard sell for me, where they normally feel like they have to work before I like them. It felt thematic here, but I didn't really like the You Just Lose condition on that. Though I will grant you, it did speed up the game, but it still felt a little bit tacked on, I think, if that makes sense. But that's it for Arkham Horror 2nd Edition. Next up, we had another roll and write on the channel as we played Twilight Inscription. Twilight Inscription from Fantasy Flight Games is a roll and write set in the Twilight Imperium universe, where you're taking a faction out, rolling your dice, and seeing what happens, what resources you can get with your dice that you get. We took the Arboric faction out for the first time today, or for the first time in that game, and we just barely won that one. I do like the simplicity of it though, and it does achieve its objective of making Twilight making Twilight Imperium take a lot less time. Considering that I just played Twilight Imperium for my New Year's Eve tradition up at my local game store, it definitely felt like it was a much shorter game. But that's it for Twilight Inscription. Next up, we had another flip and write. Actually, we had a couple of flip and writes on the channel. This one was new to the channel as we played Cartographers. Cartographers from Thunderworks Games is a flip and write set in the roll player universe, where you're trying to map out some newly discovered terrain. We ended up having terrible luck in our first game with a last attack in the fall that really set us back. We ended up being an Oblivious Ink Drinker coming out of that game, which is not a good title at all. Whereas the second game was much better. We managed to keep the attacks under control a lot better, where we managed to get the best title. I think it was Master Cartographer, as we got from that one. I do really enjoy this game. It's a very simple game, and it flows very quickly. So there's that to consider. Next up, and we're actually going to have a couple of Ask Me Anything questions coming up about roll and writes a little bit later, but not going to touch on that here. Next up, we continued with Flip and Writes as we played Welcome To. Welcome To by Blue Cocker Games is another flip and write where this time you're trying to build a suburb in a 1950s style, with trying to manage your pools, your parks, and all of that. We were building a much quieter version of Milwaukee, and we managed to score 77 points on that one. I do really enjoy this game. It's very simple. It flows very quickly, which I definitely like on that. So we'll be getting this one out to the channel again, I'm sure. Next up, we had another new game to the channel as we debuted Glory Days Boxing. And with talking about Glory Days Boxing, we're also going to spend a little bit of time in the next game talking about the Greatest Boxer Tournament. Glory Days Boxing by Sideline Strategy Games is another boxing simulator where this time you're using dice to go through everything rather than a deck of cards like you do in Title Bout 2. For this one, I decided to have an unofficial third place bout in the Greatest Boxer Tournament, where Vitaly Klitschko and Lennox Lewis were competing for third place. Vitaly Klitschko actually managed to defeat Lennox Lewis in, I believe it was by TKO. No, I don't think it was by TKO. I think it was by a decision. But I don't remember what the decision, I don't remember if it was a decision or if it ended up being a TKO. But Vitaly Klitschko went over Lennox Lewis in the third place bout in the Greatest Boxer Tournament. That's it for Glory Days Boxing. Next up, speaking of the Greatest Boxer Tournament, we had the finals in Title Bout 2. Title Bout 2 by Straight Jab Media, just like it sounds, is another boxing simulator. We've been playing through a tournament to determine the highly unofficial greatest boxer of all time, according to Phoenix Knight. The finals for this tournament was Rocky Marciano versus Rocky Balboa, and we were just back to the MGM Grand in Vegas for this one. Rocky Marciano won the bout over Rocky Balboa in the finals in 5 rounds to win the tournament, which was a lot of fun. So now let's spend a little bit of time talking about the Greatest Boxer Tournament in Title Bout 2. We'll take a final look at the brackets here. So as you can see, we've got the brackets here for the Greatest Boxer Tournament. If this would have been the bracket you submitted for the Greatest Boxer Tournament back when I called for submissions in June, you might have been able to pick one of my Arkham Horror Files campaigns next year. To be fair, the bracket buster of the tournament was most definitely down here, as I don't think anybody would have picked Ken Norton to beat Muhammad Ali, even in 15 rounds. But Norton managed to do that. That's the bracket buster of the tournament. In terms of what I'd call the bout of the tournament, I think I'd actually put that right here, where I'd call Rocky Balboa versus Ken Norton the best bout in the tournament, where you had a little bit of everything in there. You had a lot of drama with Balboa breaking his hand, and I think a lot of that's what contributed to that bout going to a 15-round majority decision, rather than being a potentially unanimous decision or even a TKO, probably in Balboa's favor. But again, in fairness, I don't think anybody would have picked Ken Norton to get as far as he did, 15 rounds into going to a decision in the quarterfinals. But that's slightly rambling on the Greatest Boxer Tournament for Title Bout 2. I might run another tournament like that again next year. I haven't decided yet. There's a lot I want to get to, but we'll give that some thought. I'm sure we'll have some exhibition bouts on Title Bout 2, and probably in Glory Days Boxing as well next year. In terms of which one I like better of the two, I do like them both, but I think I'm going to slightly lean toward Title Bout 2 on this one. Glory Days Boxing flows a lot faster, but I think there's a lot more realism and more detail with Title Bout 2, where the referees can impact the bout. You have your cornermen who who might be able to do work with the various cuts that you suffer throughout the fight. They can also impact your strategy as well, but we didn't play with any of that. Glory Days Boxing does have the judges as well, which Title Bout 2 doesn't have. That's part of why I'm leaning very slightly toward Title Bout 2, where Title Bout 2 gives you some of the elements of realism, Glory Days Boxing give you some of the others. But that's it for Title Bout 2. Next up, we stepped back into the War Games with a debut game as we debuted America Bomber, Evil Queen of the Skies from Compass Games. America Bomber, Evil Queen of the Skies by Compass Games has you jumping into an America Bomber in an alternate timeline where the Germans have basically won World War II in Europe, and now they're turning their attention to the United States. They pressured Portugal to give them a forward base in the Azores that they're using to bomb the U.S. mainland. Of course, they still can't get very far into the mainland, mainly just the East Coast. But I did really enjoy this game. Our first bombing run for a new playthrough on that channel had us targeting New York, where the bomber got chewed up something fierce as we tried to move over the mainland. Fighters and flak made us knocked out 3 of our engines, and by a minor miracle, we actually managed to land back in the Azores with 3 engines out. Like I said, I really enjoyed this game and will probably be getting it to the channel again at some point. But that's it for America Bomber, Evil Queen of the Skies. Next up, we had an old favorite on the channel as we played Target for Today from Legion War Games. Target for Today from Legion War Games is actually very similar to America Bomber, Evil Queen of the Skies, but you're actually an American bomber going through missions over World War II Europe, targeting Germany, as usual. We ended up having 2 very short runs on this channel, or on the playthroughs this month. The first time we aborted because the intercom failed on the runway. We turned around and headed for home, mostly because I figured the intercom going out was a very easy way to get my crew killed, and I decided, yeah, that's not a real good idea. We tried to do another mission later. Also, after the first mission, we had an impromptu deep product unboxing, in case you're wondering what that video was all about. The second mission that we went out on the channel later in the month ended up being a recall due to weather, where we ran into some heavy cloud cover and ended up having to turn around and head back for home. So that's 2 missions in a row that we've ended up having recalled on us. So we're going to need to, so hopefully nothing too bad there. But that's it for Target for Today. Next up, we had an old favorite on the channel as we played Dune Imperium. Dune Imperium by Direwolf Games sets you in the Dune universe as you're trying to take control of the spice world of Arrakis, actually trying to take control of the spice shipments on the world of Arrakis. We played as Countess Ariana Thorvald once again, and we defeated Earl Memnon Thorvald via tiebreakers. I very much still enjoy this game, but I was making a misplay a few times. I probably made a misplay a few times, where when I'd use my signet ring to deploy to get water, I'd use that water to pay as part of a deployment cost. You actually can't do that, where you have to be able to pay the cost before you go into a space. So I wasn't able to deploy. There was a 2 water space there that I was using a lot, and I was using the water I was getting from the signet ring to pay for that. Turns out you can't do that. So I will have to remember that moving forward in the future. But I still do really enjoy this game. Next up, Christmas in Arkham hit its climax as we played Elder Sign. Elder Sign by Fantasy Flight Games is affectionately known as Cthulhu Yahtzee, where you're trying to defeat the Ancient Ones once again via dice this time and matching up your rolls to the tasks on the adventures. Now, I still enjoy this game, but Hastur ended up sweeping Christmas in Arkham on this one. And I had a lot of frustrations with fighting all the decks, really, where the Mythos deck just kept churning out Doom after Doom after Doom with horrendous effects, which, yes, is nature of the beast for that file of games, so I'm not too worried about that. The frustrations were coming mostly from the adventure deck, though, we ended up getting to a point where we just couldn't clear our adventures to save our lives. So we ended up at a point where we just couldn't do anything, and that's the point where I tapped out and called it an adventure. Called it a campaign, taking a loss to Hastur. I'm thinking about adding some house rules into that campaign, into that game and or the campaign, where during a day, if you end up getting to a point where you can't do anything, I feel like there should be some kind of doom penalty with churn on there, where you go through where you swap out some or all of the adventures. I'll have to think about how I want to do that. Maybe like 1 doom per adventure you want to swap out, or 2 to swap them all out. I'll have to give that a little bit of thought, but there's definitely I definitely want to add something to that game. But that's it for Elder Sign. Next up, we debuted a new game as we debuted Defending America, Intercepting the America Bombers. Defending America, Intercepting the America Bombers from Compass Games is a game set in the same universe as America Bomber, Evil Queen of the Skies, where now this time you're in the U.S. long-range fighters trying to shoot down the America bombers coming over from the Azores in Germany. In this one, we didn't shoot down any bombers, but I still really enjoy the game. There's a very strong narrative focus here, as is typical in all of the Gregory Smith designs, whether they're from GMT or Compass Games. This one I expect to get to the channel again. Next up, speaking of Gregory M. Smith, we had another one of his designs as we came back to Night Fighter Ace, also from Compass Games. Night Fighter Ace from Compass Games drops you back into a night fighter over the German skies during World War II, and you're defending those skies from the Allies. This is actually a lot like Defending America, where the only main differences are the location and the fact that you're at night. We actually had a pretty quiet session of sorties on this one. I really enjoy this game. Again, the strong narrative focus here. This time we were fighting the radar, though, as well as the weather, more than the enemy bombers, I think, where we had a lot of problems with the radar, and the weather was just absolutely horrendous for us on this. Somehow we didn't manage to crash out, but it is worth noting that the weather can cause problems. Next up, we went back to an old favorite as we played Terra Mystica. Terra Mystica by Feuerland Spiel has you building up the living space for whatever group you're playing as via various actions, where you have to terraform and building mines, all of that fun stuff. In this game, we had the Orans against the Simpletons, and it was a really close game. We actually won a nail-biter on this one, where I wasn't sure if we were going to pull it off at the end. I do still really enjoy this game. There's a lot to dig into here, including the various Automa factions. But that's it for Terra Mystica. Next up, we stayed in the same universe as we moved to space to play Gaia Project. Gaia Project by Feuerland Spiel, like I said, is the space version of Terra Mystica, where you're trying to build out your empire for your space faction, and trying to do a lot of the same things that Terra Mystica has you doing. We had the Neklas in this game against the Taklon's Automa, and we got absolutely steamrolled in this game. But sometimes that happens in this universe. I really enjoy the game, but I definitely need to work on playing the Neklas a lot more. Next up, we moved back to the skies over World War II Europe as we played Interceptor Ace from Compass Games. Interceptor Ace Volume 1 from Compass Games is almost like a daytime version of Night Fighter Ace, is probably the simplest way to describe it. You're in an interceptor over the daytime skies in Germany, trying to defend from the daytime raids of the Allies. Fighter combat was something new to me that I wasn't really used to, at least in this system of games. But once again, I do really enjoy the narrative focus on this game and its additional background content. I don't think we managed to shoot down too much, as I'm thinking of how the patrols went there. But that's it for Interceptor Ace, a very quick view there. Next up, we went back to the Terra Mystica universe as we played Age of Innovation. Age of Innovation from Feuerland Spiel is almost the university version of Terra Mystica, where once again you're trying to build out your living space for your group, doing a lot of the same things that you do in Terra Mystica. We played the Swamp Psychics again versus the Simpletons. We actually built an early victory point lead on that one, and we never really looked back on that one. We kind of ran away with that one. I think it was like 105 to 80, I want to say. I do know it wasn't close. It wasn't very close at all. I definitely enjoy this whole universe of games, but that's it for Age of Innovation. Next up, we move to another sports game on the channel as we played APBA Golf. APBA Golf by APBA Games is a golf simulator where you try to take a golfer out over a round of 18 holes. We took Tiger Woods out to DC Metro for this one. We had a terrible first half of the round, managed to settle it down a little bit starting in the back nine. Even though we had a fairly rough 18th hole, we still ended up having a pretty good round with that. It's a very realistic game, which is good and bad. There was a lot for me to take in, and apparently there was one of the holes I was playing wrong, but we had a decent round on that. I could see this getting to the channel again, but there's a lot of game to take in on this one. So I'll probably want to play it off and on a few more times. Next up, we had another old favorite to the channel as we played Space Empires 4X. Space Empires 4X by GMT Games has you building up a space empire with a heavier combat focus on it. In the solo scenario, you're taking on 3 Doomsday machines. You have to destroy them before they destroy your home planet, which we managed to do in this one. We managed to win against the Doomsday machines in this one. We actually controlled the game pretty easily. It helped that we were really trying to make the Doomsday machines come to us rather than us going to the Doomsday machines, especially for the defender advantage on that one through the tactics. But like I said, I really enjoy this game. You guys have not seen the last of it on the channel. Next up, we had another new game to the channel as we played Warfighter in the World War II universe. Warfighter World War II from Danverson Games is a game set in this case it's set in World War II Europe, where you're trying to build out a squad of soldiers to take on a mission. This was my first time with Warfighter on the channel. I really do enjoy the customization of the game. As you can probably see, I've been ordering a fair amount of content for it, a lot of the expansions for it. It's going to be slow going trying to source everything. There are some games I'm not sure I'm going to get, though. I might not be able to find North Africa or the Mediterranean, so those might evade my collection. As for PMC, Private Military Contractor, I'm not sure I'm really interested in that one, just because I'm kind of hesitant around the idea of running my own military company. I don't know, though. I'm definitely open to being wrong on that one. But I really do enjoy the customization of the game, where you can also play as the Germans, theoretically, taking on American hostiles in the same setting. But in this one, we were playing as the US against German hostiles, and we absolutely got steamrolled. But it is a fairly simple system once you get to know it, and I did really enjoy this one. So that's it for Warfighter. Next up, we move to another sports game on the channel as we played APBA Hockey. APBA Hockey from APBA Games is a hockey simulator where you're playing through a full game of hockey. In this one, we took the Detroit Red Wings and the Chicago Blackhawks all-time great teams and played a game with them. Detroit won that 5-3 after Sergei Fedorov netted an empty net goal in the third period to ice the win for Detroit. I do really enjoy this game. This one's a lot of fun. I'm thinking I might, if I can find some time to do it, I might do a replay of the NCAA 2022 tournament, because I do have the teams from that tournament, but that's going to be a lot of time, and there's actually an AMA question coming about that as well, but I'm very hesitant about that. But that's it for APBA Hockey. Next up, we had another new sports game to the channel as we played ASG Golf. ASG Golf from Oakland Publishing Services, similar to APA Golf, is a golf simulator where you're taking a golfer out for a round of golf, basically. We played the first 9 holes of Tiger Woods at Augusta National. We ended up being 3 over on the day, which was pretty terrible, all things told. I'm not sure I'm going to get this game out on the channel again. I haven't completely decided about that yet. It does seem a little bit more straightforward, if slightly less realistic than APA. I'm starting to think as well, golf probably makes better Sunday content than weeknight content. Where if I set up with a Sunday morning tee time, I'm actually going to be more likely to finish the round getting it on the channel in the morning. I think golf is probably coming back to the channel. I'm just not sure which one yet. As far as which one I think is better, I do like them both. I think it kind of depends on what I'm in the mood for. If I'm in the mood for something a little more straightforward, I'm going to pull out ASG Golf. If I want something a little more realistic where I have to think a little bit more, I'm going to pull out APA Golf. Now, if you're going to ask me, if you're going to put a gun to my head and say, okay, Phoenix Knight, you can only have one golf game, which one are you keeping? I think, honestly, I'm probably keeping ASG Golf. And a lot of that is because the price point on ASG Golf is so much less punishing than it is for APA. So there is that consideration to make as well here. Whereas the price point for ASG is a lot more manageable than I think for APA. And the quality drop-off really isn't that terrible in the grand scheme of things. Where you can get courses and golfers a lot easier, I think, with ASG than you can with APA. Anyway, that's it for ASG Golf. Next up, last up we actually had today's video as we ventured back into our background career of the Hunters. The Hunters by GMT Games is the name of the series that Silent Victory is also a part of, where we're back into a German U-boat during World War II in the seas of the Atlantic. We've been having a really good playthrough of that on the channel in the grand scheme of things. Today's wasn't so much. We actually had a fairly rough 3 patrols where we had to abort the first patrol, especially after almost getting caught in an escort death loop with getting attacked by an escort. I think that was the patrol where I got a little bit too greedy, where I tried to attack surfaced, even on a night attack, and almost ended up getting sunk because of it. Boy, finally managed to get out of that with nothing sunk. I think the next 2 patrols we each managed to sink a ship. The Allies are definitely wising up to the U-boats, though, so I will need to be very careful if I'm going to get through the last few months of 1942 and World War II. Anyway, that's it for the Hunters. We're over 36 minutes in, and somehow we're just now going to start recapping Mystical Munchies. For Mystical Munchies this month, we were cooking out of the Final Fantasy XIV Ultimate Cookbook. So here's how the recipes all turned out. First up, we made the crab croquette as the appetizer. It was a little bit on the spicy side, but I think spicy was actually kind of welcome in this case. The consistency was pretty good. I was worried about that as I was worried to see how everything was going to hold together. The taste wasn't too bad either. It's probably not something I'm going to make again just because it was a lot of work to put this all together. Next up, we had the honey muffin as this side. It actually turned out to be really good, and it's definitely best when it just comes out of the oven. It does keep as leftovers decently well, but you really want to have this best out of the oven if you can. It actually could be an entree very easily. It wasn't as sweet as I was expecting either. That's one thing I was talking about during the recipe as I was making it, was I was worried it was going to be very sweet. It ended up not being as sweet as I thought it would be, so that was very welcome. Next up, we had the breakfast with the farmer's breakfast. Actually, it was the entree farmer's breakfast. This one, I probably ended up going a little bit too far with the eggs, as you saw in there. It was a really hearty breakfast, and it was actually pretty good. It was a bit hot, but that's just out of the oven, so that's kind of par for the course on that one. I definitely would make that one again. Next up, we had the papanazzi, which was the donuts as the dessert. These turned out to be really good, and apparently, I learned to make jam. Who knew? It also does seem to keep pretty well as leftovers. I was I was eating off of these still for a few days afterwards. Last up for the recipes, we had just a simple batch of lemonade. It actually turned out to be sweet, but not overly sweet, if that makes sense. The flavor wasn't too strong, and that's what I was worried about, it being sweet and the flavor being strong. It was neither one of those things, and it actually turned out pretty good. That's it for Mystical Munchies, finally. Next up, let's go through Ask Me Anything. In case you're new to the channel, first of all, welcome to the channel. We had quite a few new subscribers in December. And second of all, the Ask Me Anything segment is a segment where you can ask me questions, and as long as I don't think they're too personal, I usually answer them during the segment. The way you get a question on the AMA segment is during any video from the end of month recap to usually the last game video before the recap goes up. And I try to mention that when the end of the month is coming up. You'll put a question in any video with an AMA, you'll leave a comment with a question that you want me to answer with an AMA tag in it. And like I said, as long as it's not too personal, I will usually answer that. So let's tab over to my notes because we do have quite a few AMA questions this month. So after I made the crab croquette on the channel, Jester chimed in and wanted to know if there were any foods that I wouldn't eat or try with Mystical Munchies. I have very few what I consider like hard no foods. I think the one I can think of is Brussels sprouts. I've never really been a big fan of just the idea of Brussels sprouts. To me just doesn't really sound right to me. Like I said, I'm pretty much open to trying anything on Mystical Munchies, but I do have a few hard no's, and that's the only one that really comes to mind right off the top of my head. Next up, Jester wanted on Roll for Great Old Ones. Jester wants my views on roll and writes in general, and what do I like playing in roll and writes. For roll and writes, for me, theme really does matter on that one. Because I'm also very hesitant on roll and writes, just because I don't like the idea of, especially with your paper-based roll and writes, where the pads are made of paper. And the problem there is you'd have to rebuy some of your games if you end up playing through them, and that's made me very hesitant on roll and writes. It's also part of the hesitation I've had on book games in general, where if I end up playing them through and I really like them and want to go through them again, I'd have to buy another copy of the book. That's where I'd be a little more open to like a PDF version of some of those book-based games. It's also part of why you haven't seen Bismarck Solitaire and On to Moscow on the channel, but that's not really related to Jester's question. Hopefully that answers that question for you, Jester. Speaking of which, when I did my product unboxing on the 18th, you wanted to know what seasons of baseball I was interested in and what I would do a replay of. I'm not necessarily focused on seasons of baseball so much as eras. I like to have at least one season from the fairly modern eras. I haven't gone back too far yet. As far as what I would do a replay of, I'm not sure I'd do a replay of any season yet. There are a couple of reasons that make me hesitant on that. One is obviously time. I just don't have time to go through a replay of a season. You'd have to play through 162 some odd games, plus ticker games, and that's actually related to another reason I'm hesitant on doing replays of seasons, where I don't have a good ticker game to go through. Plus, I just kind of prefer the cards and dice rather than doing everything on the computer, so there's also that to consider. It's also the same reason I'm hesitant on doing replays for even hockey, even my app of hockey. Without having a good ticker, I wouldn't want to do that. Then on Gaia Project, Jester wanted me to chime in on what I find the biggest problem is with recording videos, or what I don't enjoy. Also, why I record instead of stream, basically, is where that's going. Generally, what I find with the biggest problem is in post-production. I don't remember where I heard this from, but I heard that you tend to spend twice as much time in post-production as you do actually filming the videos. I don't necessarily find that to be true, but I do tend to spend a fair amount of time in post-production. One thing I don't enjoy is when a video crashes on me after I've been working on it and I have to work on it and I have to do it all again. I generally try to save my projects as I'm working on them, but sometimes that just gets to be a little bit frustrating. And why I record instead of stream. There are two main reasons why I record instead of stream. The first reason is I've got a separate game room devoted to all my board games, and I record videos in there. Whereas I'm sitting at my desk in the living room right now, and I don't really like the idea of trying to daisy chain run a lot of cable into my game room so I can stream. Plus, I'm not really sure that my system could handle streaming anyway. You might recall late last year where I actually did a little bit of streaming on Twitch, but that turned out to be a disaster because I couldn't get a hold of the technical aspects of that to make streams turn out very well. Plus, being that separated from the game area versus the streaming setup is another reason why I'm hesitant to stream on the channel. So that's hopefully that answers that question slightly rambly. Then when I was unboxing Sentinels of the Multiverse Definitive Edition, Jester wanted me to chime in on my favorite boss battler game. And he listed off a few examples. I think he had Arkham Horror, Aeon's End, Sentinels of the Multiverse, Marvel Champions, stuff like that. I guess I never really looked at Arkham Horror as a boss battler game, just because you've got that adventure aspect to it where you're trying to either solve the mysteries on the Ancient Ones or seal gates to try to keep the Ancient One from coming. But I guess I could see it being a boss battler game. As far as my favorite boss battler game goes, I think I'm going to give the nod on that one to Aeon's End, but I'm going to hold the final answer to that pending a few replays of Sentinels of the Multiverse with the Definitive Edition. So, pre-Sentinels of the Multiverse, I'm calling my favorite boss battler Aeon's End. After, we'll have to come back to that. But that's it for Ask Me Anything. Next, let's talk about what's coming in January. If you're a regular on the channel, then you know January is time for the winter campaign in Arkham Horror the card game. This year will be no exception to that. This year, we're doing a very different winter campaign where we're going to do what I like to call a chronologically accurate Innsmouth conspiracy. Now, you're probably asking right now, Phoenix Knight, what do you mean by a chronologically accurate Innsmouth conspiracy? I'm going to get slightly spoilerific on what I mean by that, but we'll do that in the winter campaign intro, which will be coming later this week. As for the rest of the games on the channel, we're going to revisit our background play of Harry Potter Hogwarts Battle, since it's been a while since we've done that. Then we're going to go into Aeon's End. I touched on that briefly as being still my favorite boss battler. Next, we're going to try Expeditions from Stonemaier Games out as a Wednesday night video. Last time we played it was on a Sunday. We're going to see how it works on Wednesday. Then we're going to revisit our playthrough of Mag 23 Guadalcanal from Historic Wings. And finally, we're going to close the month with a visit to Twilight Inscription. As for Mystical Munchies, January is going to feature another visit to the Marvel Universe, where we're going to go cook with Deadpool. For Mystical Munchies, we're going to make Look at Them Puppies, Chickarones, Not the Only Fish in the Sea, and Desert Chimney. With that, let's wrap this recap up. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the end of December recap. Hopefully you've enjoyed me on the ride through 2023. I'm going to have some additional retrospective videos to finish out the year tomorrow. So we'll have a few more chats on that where we'll just get together and kind of talk about things on the channel. But that's it for this recap. Also coming up on the channel, Wednesday, as I mentioned, we're going to be playing Harry Potter Hogwarts Battle. Later this week, we're going to have the campaign intro for the winter campaign in Arkham Horror the card game, and we'll have the first scenario for the winter campaign on Sunday next week. Thank you for watching the video. Please give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Be sure to turn on notifications so you get my content. Be well, stay safe, take care of yourselves and your loved ones, and I'll be back with more videos in the future. Until then, take care, everyone.